Yo, what is up, guys? Will here from Fantasy Flock Basketball with Canyon, and we're going over some waiver wire pickups for week 6 here. A lot of injuries and significant changes in usage we're anticipating for some of these guys. And Underdog Fantasy is a place where you can take advantage of those. Some lines. Underdog is a place where you can place player prop cards, get yourself winning some money on Underdog. If you don't have an Underdog account, using code Canyon, the link is in the description as well. You get a 100% deposit match up to $100. You can look at some of these spots, take advantage of some of these lines from guys who are going to get some usage changes, get some low lines you can take the over on or under, depending on situations. But once again, code Canyon if you don't have an account. But we'll get into these right here. The first waiver wire pickups, it's kind of a combo. 2 guys for the Timberwolves. Karl-Anthony Towns went down with the injury. It's looking like it's going to be a 3-week injury, which, is definitely the lower side of what we were expecting when that injury happened, but still significant amount of time in the NBA season for fantasy. So first guy I want to call out, Jaden McDaniels, who's missed the past few games with an illness, but he should be back soon. I think he'll get the biggest bump in usage for the Timberwolves from what we've seen from him. He's been a very efficient scorer, but hasn't had, super massive usage opportunity games. I think you could have some of those, especially when you remove a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns from the lineup. So I think he is the priority add of guys that might be available for these Timberwolves. He probably is rostered, but definitely check, especially since he's missed the past few games. And the second guy here, Kyle Anderson, who I think is definitely needs to be picked up. He got a huge bump in minutes this last game, playing 39, season high. Obviously, it was without Cat and McDaniels, but still, even with McDaniels returning, I still think Anderson's going to have a decent role and provide value in most leagues for sure.
Yeah, I'm really big on Kyle Anderson. I agree. I think McDaniels will get the biggest bump too, but Kyle Anderson's such a savvy, veteran that this team could really use with a higher minutes bump. We saw him already in this last game with a pretty solid line all over. Next up here, we've got Zach Collins for the Spurs. Jakob Poeltl's going to be out for about a week, so Collins he's getting back from his own injury. Is starting to slowly creep up there in minutes, due to the Poeltl injury as well, but he should still see some really good minutes or usage without Poeltl and have a solid role off the bench even when he comes back. Collins he's gonna do something similar to Poeltl, maybe not as high of rebounding upside, but he's gonna have some really good defensive stat upside. He's an efficient scorer, a pretty savvy scorer for a bench center coming off for the Spurs here. So we see him approaching 30 minutes here without Poeltl, and I think it's just going to keep going up, especially with Poeltl out. I think he could be a really valuable add. But again, when Poeltl comes back, I think Collins can still be closer to pushing 20 minutes because they've been missing this, center depth all year. And so now he's finally back from the injury. Once he kind of gets his wits about him, gets fully healthy, I think he could be a pretty valuable add, especially in deeper leagues.
Definitely. Next up here, we've got Markelle Fultz, who had his first game back off the injury. His first game this season, he was limited to 17 minutes. That was the report heading into the game. We were going to see, a 15, 17-minute cap, and that's what we got and expected. But he played pretty well, not super efficient shooting or anything, but 8 points, a board and 4 assists with 2 defensive stats. I think there is a path for Fultz to be able to replicate production from, his first season with the Magic just in this role. I know they've got a lot of guys. They're willing to go big lineups, but even with Cole Anthony returning as well, I think there is a chance that Fultz is a 26, 27, 28-minute guy and plays, these starter minutes and is close to consistent starter. And those kind of guys need to be rostered in most leagues. So I think he has the upside there. I know this, it doesn't feel like there's a huge path for crazy fantasy production when you talk about a guy like Banchero, Wagner there, what we've seen from Bol. But I still think, especially at the guard spot, there's a chance for some upside. I think Fultz can provide that.
Yeah, we saw a little bit last year, right? He came back from an injury absence last year with a lot of guards there, and he did really well. He ended up being a very highly valued waiver ad, so there's no reason that I don't think he could do that again. Next up here, we've got another little tandem here, Poku and Jalen Williams. Poku I know is a fan favorite for a lot of people, just super inconsistent minutes and usage, especially as of late, so it's really hard to drop him with a super high defensive upside and scoring and rebounding upside. So he's probably a hold in larger leagues, but I'm not super excited about him moving forward. I know he's an interesting player, probably really good for points league specifically because of those blocks upsides, but the minutes have just been a roller coaster, right? He's been around. He's had a 37-minute game, and then he had an 18 and 14-minute game back to back. So he's just going to be really inconsistent depending on matchup. Again, the Thunder go so deep; they have so many different rotations they throw out there. So Poku is fun and all, but I'm not as excited about him as a guy like Jalen Williams, who we're starting to see have more consistent and higher minutes than Poku. Getting really solid usage, really good scoring upside, and pretty solid, decent peripherals as well. So I'm more excited about Jalen Williams moving forward. He's going to be closer to a consistent like mid 20s to high 20s in minutes. He looks really good as far as scoring goes, and this is a guy that a lot of people were excited about in the offseason. A guy that really rose up draft boards prior to the NBA draft, and we're starting to see why. So I think he can be higher 20-ish minutes, more consistent player. As far as lineups goes, I think he's a guy, with length and switchability that, is going to fit in more rotations for the Thunder moving forward, depending on whoever they play. Whereas Poku, I feel like, is a very scenario-based player, and we're kind of seeing that reflected in the minutes that we've seen in the past month. So I like Poku. I think you hold him still, but I'm way more excited about Jalen Williams moving forward.
Definitely, and it would not surprise me if we see decent minutes from Poku in some of these games moving forward. I think he is definitely worth rostering in most deeper leagues 100%, but I do agree. I think Jalen Williams, as far as upside, we've seen more consistent minutes over this past couple stretch. Definitely more excited about him long term for sure. And next up here, I've got John Wall. I know he's probably rostered. I know we get a lot of these, this guy's rostered in my leagues. He definitely should be. He probably was already rostered, but I was checking roster percentages for a lot of these guys. And in a lot of sites, he is sub 60% in terms of roster percentage, which is just insane to me. So I think he's a guy with these injuries to Paul George and Kawhi obviously gives him a huge usage bump. We've seen really solid production games from him. But even with Paul George in some of these games at the beginning of the season, he was pretty efficient, especially from an assist standpoint. In a lot of those games. So, even with, Paul George returning, these guys are going to miss time with injuries, both Paul George and Kawhi, obviously, which is going to give John Wall a bump. And he's played pretty well. And I think that's a lot of what you want to look for in guys who get these usage bumps. It's being able to point to efficiency to then supplement those usage bumps. So obviously, John Wall, we've been able to see that over the stretch, but a guy like McDaniels, who we talked about at the beginning of the video, we've gotten to see that efficiency, and you expect the usage bump to bring that too. But I want to kind of close out this waiver video. We talked about a lot of guys specifically, but an overall waiver tip for NBA fantasy. I know a lot of times people will only check their waivers when they need to add a player to, maybe you're missing some slots in your starting lineup for the night, so you're willing to make a move that day. But I really think you need to be checking your waiver wire daily, because you'll get a lot of players in your league who will drop players that should not be on waivers due to frustration, weird minutes. Maybe it was they had a couple game stretch where they struggled. We do these live streams where people will come in and they'll ask us questions about, earlier in the season, should I drop Jabari Smith? He had a couple bad games. I'll agree. He even looked lost in a lot of these games, but these kind of guys who have upside that are going to play 30 plus minutes, and we've seen it from Jabari this season, those guys should not be dropped. They should not be on waivers in any leagues. Getting a lot of questions about guys like Keegan Murray too. So I think waivers for NBA fantasy, it's something you just need to you need to really check the waiver wire daily, because you get a lot of these opportunities where, maybe it's not even just a frustration thing. Maybe they really thought that was the worst player on their team and they wanted to pick up somebody that was going to play for them that day. That happens in a lot of leagues. So I think you can really take advantage of your waiver wire if it runs daily to, really be looking at that. So let us know in the comments if there's anybody we missed, any waiver guys you think are sneaky ads for this week and maybe even moving forward long term. We're getting to that point in the NBA season where we feel pretty comfortable about what we expect from teams overall, but obviously a lot of injuries open things up, and we're seeing that with this waiver wire week especially. Appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you in the next one.